What's happening, so fam? So, my bad. I've been running, trying to figure out some stuff here. So, if you're wondering why I'm not making this on Patreon versus making it here, well, recording it here is a little bit easier than recording it on Zoom and then putting it on Patreon. So I took all the questions from everyone who was on Patreon, and I'm going to be reading your questions as I start channeling King Solomon. So for anyone who might be catching this video while it's going on live, I'm going to be channeling King Solomon, and I'm not going to be reading any of your questions on the thread. You guys can talk to each other there. But if you want to ask any particular questions, I only exclusively reserve that for my Patreon community. So I have the questions up here. If you are in Patreon and you were able to post your questions, that's good. Great. You still have some time to post some questions in that thread that we're going to have on Patreon. So you're going to give me a few minutes really fast. We're going to start setting the intention that we're in the same room together right now. And we got some pretty good questions that we're going to be asking King Solomon today. We're going to be asking him about wealth. We're going to be asking him about wisdoms and insights for us today. We're also going to be asking him about this whole corona thing that's been going on. Having a hard time opening up my package. There we go. We're also going to be asking him about things about the light body, how to expand the light body, how to expand our wealth. What else we got in here? So far so good. These are some pretty deep questions. Me personally, I've been working with King Solomon for a quick minute now. And he's been teaching me a lot about his seals, which are basically tied to advanced alchemy and stuff like that. It's been some pretty crazy stuff that we've been doing. Give me 2 minutes. I'll be right back. I gotta take one quick little detour and then we'll get started. Everybody set the intention that we're in the same room right now. I've let go of smoking cannabis, but today I was told that I have to. Okay. So now that that's been done, I just took one quick little hit. I'm going to take my cloud here. I'm going to do a quick shuffle on them. Just so like I know what kind of energy is going on right now with this reading. Okay. 1, 2, 3. So we got some yin cloud cards here going on, which are basically telling us that it's going to show us about the truth of duality, nothingness, and how to become happier with ourselves. So pretty good energy so far. All right, I'm going to give it about 1 more minute or 30 seconds at least before we get started. That way we can give everyone an opportunity to come in so we can listen to King Solomon's wisdom. Again, if you are seeing this live, it will only be live for a certain amount of time, and then it's going to be strictly only available in a special playlist that I've created most recently for the Patreon community. So if you want to have more access to every other channeling that I've ever done, you want to join Patreon. All right, it's 5 o'clock. It was 5 minutes, and let's get this started. Everyone, in order for us to summon King Solomon, you have to be open with your mind. You got to be open with your heart. Most importantly, you have to be open with your solar plexus. All right. So at any moment when he steps in, his power can feel like, ooh, you're really high, or almost as though it's wants to crush you. You have to surrender into it, no matter how intense it feels. If it feels really intense, remember that the moment you try to fight that intensity, you're gonna kind of step out of the channeling realm that everyone else is gonna be at, and you'll also slow down the bandwidth that we're all gonna be experiencing as a collective by doing this channeling. Okay, so all right, let's take a deep breath again. And we are going to summon King Solomon. Allow it to step in through your heart chakra, through your solar plexus, through your crown chakra, whatever other chakra needs stimulation at this time. King Solomon, it's me, Excel, again. I'm just curious for an audience for my tribe, please. Now you may speak for me on my behalf, he says. All right, perfect. Thank you, first of all, King Solomon, for answering our call and for imparting your wisdom with us today. You have taught me a lot lately, and I know that this can definitely be very valuable for the collective. Some of the questions that I may be asking you may seem linear. Of course, don't break your oath of having to abide by free will, but I am definitely curious to as much information as possible that you can provide on the following questions. The first most important one, we have a list here, but I really feel like it's important because there's so many people dealing with wealth that are having a hard time right now. So King Solomon, can you tell us, what's the truest answers to wealth? Because you were known to be very wealthy, not only in the terms of material aspects, but also the terms of alchemy. And lore says that you were someone who was connected to God, right? And that God favored. So I'm curious as to how, obviously being born into royalty, but how did you learn more about the alchemy of wealth when you were incarnated? And what have you learned outside of this time space that could pertain to that? I had learned that wealth is only a state of mind. We understood the material to be wealth only as a manifestation of what lies deep within. Many seek abundance, but fail to understand the alchemy behind it. The alchemy being a state of consciousness. Wealth is only as open as your consciousness may allow for that wealth to step in. You are now experiencing a fourth dimensional transition of what you know to be the law of attraction in this time space. The fifth dimensional law of attraction template describes wealth as being deep within the heart and deep within the mind. The mind only constructs matter after the heart has generated the energy to do so. All wealth comes back down to consciousness and your wealth of consciousness within consciousness and wealth. All else happens as a byproduct of your wealth of consciousness. This was one fundamental reason as to why I never stopped attaining consciousness of wisdom during my incarnation and lifetime. All I could understand was the wealth of alchemy. That wealth opened doors that the common man may not be able to easily interpret. What else would you like to know? Okay, so you're saying that consciousness is a state of, so your wealth is a state of consciousness. Definitely, I definitely learned that most recently. And I didn't know it came from Solomon, but basically I was working a lot with the law of manifestation, and it came back to understanding this one fundamental law of the universe, which is like the fact that you can bend reality, that's wealth. If you can energy heal, you're wealthy, because there's people that can't do that. If you can talk to guides, that's a form of wealth. And we only see those as like potentials of abilities and capabilities. But the fact that someone like me can summon so much alchemy and not, I can attain things that people only dream about, right? And that should be considered wealth. So we each individually have a set of alchemy that pertains to ourselves. And when you allow that alchemy to stand its value, which is your wealth, right? Your wealth of knowledge, then that actually does transmit in some way, shape, or form in your reality, because you're changing the perception of wealth altogether, and it has to reconstruct matter. So that's my personal lesson from Solomon. He doesn't really have anything else to say pertaining to that question. I'm going to see if I can come up with one other question pertaining to wealth. King Solomon. The world's economy seems to be at a questionable state. What can you tell us about the manifestation of COVID and how that pertains to wealth in our timeline? The economy will have to take a state of collapse, because the previous economy, just like all economy, is merely an illusion. The transformation of economy into wealth is the illusion that the elite had created to maintain power under those who were going to go through the Iron Age. The economy will restructure itself under what you know to be credits. All restructuring of the old must take place to fully transition into fifth dimensional new earth. All you have to do is maintain your consciousness of wealth, and wealth will surely follow. All now are being tested with acknowledging the wealth of knowledge and the wealth of spirit that the collective and each individual partake in. You must understand that wealth is not something created and maintained. It is a wealth of illusion that is constructed and deconstructed by the individual's sense of belief in that creation. Your economy must fall as the collective has seen flaws in the design that is manifested as wealth in this timeline. So many people have been suffering and asking for a solution out of it. And that's why the economy has to collapse. Yes, exactly. Okay. That's understandable and that's fair. Okay. Everyone take a deep breath. King Solomon, we have a new question. You may ask, what wisdom or insight would you have for us right now? Both the wisdom and the insight are to be in the present now, this now moment. All else follows the description of the energy that is being manifested. The present collective is manifesting in many different directions. The most recent alchemic event that took place has shifted the energy of the collective drastically towards new paradigms, but the work has yet to be done to solidify that highest paradigm, the one you consider to be New Earth. Now in this present moment, it is integral for each individual to understand their potential within their own universes. Their universes collide with the manifestation of other universes. All universes fall under the great geometric principles known as Source and the All. Alchemy is just a variation of combinations of Source that allow certain beings in certain dimensions to understand and bend reality according to the limits of bending in that dimension. It is important to understand the alchemy of now, for this state of consciousness is merely another state of alchemy. The alchemy of now will present itself with difficulties. It will express itself with exaggeration. It will disconnect from the illusion of the old reality as it seems to get more chaotic. It is those who maintain the presence of the now, the heaven on earth, the internal harmony, a frequency that is forever present. Here, New Earth lies. When we understand the power of the present moment, all intersecting realities become options that are easily attainable beyond your normal scope of understanding. The laws of vibration apply, but the laws of vibration come back to cosmic consciousness, a singular consciousness that exists beyond us and within us. When we sit with the alchemy within, the alchemy of the present moment, all fragmentation must cease to exist, for all is now. The human collective has understood the dimensions of time, space, and fragmentation to be necessary even within the constructs of the mind. The mind is not fragmented. It is made to believe that it is fragmented. All light shines brightly through all layers of darkness. For light and darkness always seem to come back to one. Similar polarities, differentiating only in degree from one another to a greater truth. Understanding this in the now moment is the most important aspect to shifting the internal universes within. As a result, the new earth manifest seems to be getting closer. All alchemy is most powerful in the now. My alchemy tables design the presence of the gods, the angels, and the highest beings to be in the present moment of each individual in contact with those spells. We have forgotten the great scope of the ethers, the great unknown, the great connector. It is the ethers that hold the greatest amount of wealth, for everything transitions from fifth dimensional consciousness through the ethers into the third. We understand alchemy to be a subject separate from our own, when alchemy simply lies deep within. This is the understanding of the now. And all you can do is that now. Every collective individual must choose for themselves to make this shift internally. You may now ask the next question. So I'm not really sure. I don't remember everything he just said, but he said something. You guys heard it more than I did. The gist of it is that the universe, what we're supposed to be doing right now is simply focusing on ourselves and tapping into our own inner alchemy. What most can we as a collective do to make this transition time as smooth as possible for as many as possible? I think he already answered that one in that last question. But King Solomon, if there is more that you can add, that particularly just runs towards that question, could you please let us know more about it? As a collective, no more can be done than other than what has been spoken. The collective must understand the alchemy within. Until then, and only then, will a permanent shift so subtle in nature will fully take place. It is now a time in history that the distorted text known as the Bible describes an event, revelations. Revelations has begun and has taken place a many of times. With revelation comes the choice to stand up or stand aside. It is those now that have the calling of light that step forward to take action. It is those now with the calling of light that choose to make movement. And then I heard like a bunch of different messages, like it was too fast for me to translate all of it, but the gist of it is that there is no other answer because that's the alchemy that has to be taking place right now. And then that's the only alchemy that really matters, that we need to use all the tools that we have and stop separating all the tools that we've attained through not only our own experiences but through like maybe the energy work that we've done. And we need to understand that everything that we've been doing is outdated, even like your personal beliefs of how things should be run or how you wanted your old reality to run. Those things have become outdated. And now we also need to understand that the shift of reality comes with choosing to let go of the magic we've come to understand so that we can embrace a magic that's right in front of us that is simply unknown but is so much more powerful. And as I'm like saying that, I can feel like this tension in my arms, almost like what does that even mean? Like, right? It's kind of like scary, but it makes a lot of sense because there comes a moment. I think I even said that yesterday in our meditation, that there comes a moment where you know so much about a subject matter that you may feel like that's the only one answer, right, to it. But not being able to say that you don't know enough about the subject matter and relinquishing yourself into that is what actually ends up producing more like breakthroughs. And every scientist really knows that. And it's been something that's King Solomon has been definitely teaching me with certain keys. That was a good answer. Okay, cool. Next one, King Solomon. Somebody would like to know what practices you would share about the quickest, most powerful ways to develop your spiritual body. Your spiritual light body, sorry. Everyone take a deep breath. Let go of your minds. The quickest way to accelerate the light body is to simply embrace all that you are while simultaneously abandoning the constructs of the mind that you've created around the potential of all that you are. It is imperative to understand that when a being in the third dimension fathoms the potential of power, that potential of power becomes finite, thus linear. For the imagination sets limits for what potential of power each individual can seek. The truest potential of power is infinite. That is the one truest answer. To abandon the constructs of the mind, of everything that anyone has ever learned. To let go of the hopes, the expectations, the desires, and the heartaches of manifestation and the law of attraction. One can only truly accept the understanding which is now. The light body alters itself when infinity has been fully embraced. The mind was designed for the third dimension to be a tool that tempered some and liberated many. Though those of us no longer in the third dimension have mind, it is not mind as is perceived in the third dimension. Mind is still closely associated with brain in the third dimension, when mind is simply an experience of colliding other intelligent infinities against each other to produce thought and alternate realities with each subsequent thought creation. For every limit, every pulse of the imagination creates a world upon itself, which many will never experience. Thus, coming back to Source, as Source creates infinite vibrations and infinite possibilities of the present moment. All alchemy, all infinity is both an illusion and a logical fact. To understand the light body is to understand that collapse upon the third dimension on the physical body lies a dimension of just pure light. If you choose to strip away the dimension of matter so that you may only see the dimension of light, thus heaven on earth. For heaven on earth is merely an experience of the light body embracing the light that is. Sciences of old and sciences of the now are comprehending the power of light beyond just the concepts of speed, illumination, and consciousness. Similarly, as there is a collapsed version of light there is a collapsed version of anti-light. This is not to be confused with darkness. For when you stand in the void, there is still illumination. When the consciousness would travel to the void, if darkness truly existed, nothing could be fully perceived. That would truly be non-existence on the opposite side of infinity, assuming infinity is a coin. We choose to observe infinity from this side of the coin. We may call it heads, and the lack of existence and the antithesis of light would also exist on the tails. This is why it is imperative to understand how the soul plays an integral part in this coin of the cosmos. As this coin flips through the nothingness, spins on the tables of the waters of reality, it continuously experiences an ebb and flow, blend of the creations that we perceive. This is true for any dimension. The center most important inertia of a coin spinning or flipping could be considered the soul. When the soul has its proper rotation, a coin can go on for what seems like an eternity. Because simply both options exist in a constant loop of potentiality or possibility. It is the natural instinct of every individual on the third dimension to experience the coins of fate, possibility, and potential. And it is their perception of touching the liberation of this knowledge that grants them a subconscious fear which places their perception on an alternate reality on one side of that coin that turns to manifest. If all could understand that the coin never ceases to continue its spin, the struggle of the constant ebb and flow, the rhythm of the pendulum will cease to exist. That is all I can share on this topic for now, until a further question. Okay, so that was deep. That was deep. What else we got in here? King Solomon. Okay, I have another great question. This is my question. In your books, you have a certain chapter about solar deities and how you state how solar deities can be prideful and arrogant. A lot of solar deities also bring a lot of potential and power. and kindness. So is this a personal opinion that you wrote in your books, or is it a simple observation? And if it's an observation, like scientifically, why is it important to a note, like note down? Because you don't talk about any other deities from like other levels of celestial equivalents. Like it's only specifically the solar deities that you talk about. Can you shed light on that, please? Because I've been salty about that for a hot minute. This is merely a fact. To understand the nature of something is again referring back to my analogy of a coin. The greatest truth is in understanding the full nature of any given subject. Some natures go unspoken. Other natures must be called upon, thus highlighting a preference of the coin to even out the spin that exists within each soul of the multidimensional cosmos. When I annotated this particular highlight, I wanted to bring just cause as to why the solar deities in certain portions of history seem evil and destructive. In my mother tongue, we understood Ra as a potential of destruction, as the ancient Egyptians had also understood. But once again, looking at the flip of this coin that never ceases to spin, with destruction comes rebirth, for nothing is ever lost, as there is always a place on either side of that coin that any perception may last indefinitely until it chooses to take another form of orientation. You must understand that it is not just the solar deities that may perceive to be arrogant and prideful at times, as every multidimensional being, be it Pleiadian, be it of another constellation or another level of existence, has a flaw or what seems to be an absence of light. From your level of understanding, alchemy is always based off matter. Similarly, you have discovered antimatter. For every equal, there is an opposite. The powers and consciousnesses of the limitations upon matter lie within the antimatter. These are thus the characteristics described as prideful and or arrogant, sloppy and or reckless, destructive and illuminating. To see a perception of either side of that coin opens up the full understanding of the subject matter, which is infinity, realigning the soul, no matter how pertinent that information may be, with the all. All men are God. All gods are children of God. And all are men in comparison to the one true God, source that is. This is the greatest understanding of all. Okay. That's really that's deep. That's deep too. I don't even know what to say about that. Like we're all, we'll never be, that's deep. We'll never be as powerful as source itself externally, though we will be. And that we always have to maintain our humility in the aspect of like, we are creators and we can be the ultimate all. But similarly, on that same flip side of that coin, we are nothing. We're always going to be less than to God, even though we are God. And like God being like source or like creation, like you can't supersede creation, because creation is infinite. So like there's always, it always puts you at this neutral point where you need to like calm down. That's a really interesting statement as well. Let me see if there's any highlights for new questions. I don't have any new questions. So if someone on Patreon that's in our link right now has a question, post it and I can ask it. Or we can close the broadcast. One of the two. Post your question in there, or just say happy in the comment box, and I'll know whether or not to end it if you say happy. Okay. If I get one more happy, oh no, that's the same person. If I get one more happy, then I'm letting it go. That's pretty deep. I would say that's pretty deep. Like I don't think that needs to get like even deeper, because you did answer our questions, like everything that's on everyone's mind right now, which is wealth, like what we can do to like make everything better, and like ultimately how do we make ourselves better, like what's the most important thing to pay attention to. And that just comes down to like understanding that right now there's light. I really like the way how he described that right now, since all these different multidimensional aspects are collapsed upon each other, you have the opportunity to simply just let go of this reality to be in just a dimension of pure light where everything is brand new, right? But to be able to step into that, you have to totally let go of your expectation of what that light would even be, or like even try to step into like, hey, I'm trying to find light, right? Like you would have to just be like, okay, that dimension exists. I know nothing about that dimension. Poof, like let's go experience it. And that causes like this internal apprehension for people. And once you can choose to exist there, once you're there, you have to understand that similarly, there is another dimension that doesn't have that potential of light, that seems to be like the antithesis of light, which would be the shadow. But the shadow doesn't exist because, yes, complete and total darkness exists, but complete and total darkness is also non-existent. And we think about the shadow being like this super scary thing, or like darkness being like this really, really scary thing. When you really go into like these hyper states of meditation, you go into the void, and there's still always kind of like a glow, like you can still see and experience everything, and that's the nothingness. And people associate internally like the nothingness with the subconscious, with the shadow, with uncertainty, with chaos, with evil, with negative, when really it's just another like pseudo variation of light. Is just not being perceived under those limits, and therefore when you experience any level of darkness, it gets demonized in some way. So that was like actually pretty cool too. um what else? What was another good highlight about that? I love the fact that he, like, it really, I felt like this huge shift in my brain when he said that since reality is a coin, and I've already talked about this in Patreon, but like since reality is a coin and like it's constantly spinning into nothingness, it never has a stop. And like when we even think about alchemy, that's something I've taught a lot of people. Like alchemy just doesn't stop when you're not healing somebody. Like it's constantly happening. Like you have to shift your mind into that. And then also seeing that like when the coin is flipping and it seems to be like wobbling or coming off its axis is because you're technically not in alignment with your soul. And if you're not in alignment with your soul, that's why you're perceiving one end of that spectrum of that coin spinning and coming off its axis than another, because you would then, be, especially if you're feeling like fear and all these other things, it would then shift the coin to be on that darker spectrum of whatever it is that you're creating. So like in order to really be a creator of your reality is understanding that both are completely necessary, and like they're not even what they seem to be based off of everything you've learned in any reality. And when you embrace the uncertainty of not knowing exactly what it is that you're doing, but knowing enough to want to do it, then you open up the truest doors of reality. So that was a really cool one that I could really feel my brain shifted, because sometimes you think about manifestation as being like, oh my God, gotta keep pumping, gotta keep it going, go. And then all of a sudden, like when you miss a day or something, like someone like going to the gym, you feel like the momentum has slowed down, or that you've been building so much momentum, and then all of a sudden like things slow down and you're like, oh my God, maybe I'm not putting enough like energy into it. And just that ease of knowing that, oh, it never stops spinning anyway. So it's not about the amount of energy you're putting in, it's like the alignment of energy, which would eventually just be like the acceleration. Like you got to make the coin spin faster, right? But you're not trying to raise the vibration, you're just trying to simply put it in its place, and then everything starts forming around that. So that was also another like really cool one, because it shaves off a lot of tension of like, okay, things are not going my way, I'm screwed, like I did something wrong, right? Or no, it's like things are not going exactly as planned, how do I adjust? And it gives you that potentiality of not falling back into victimization, because especially when you're manifesting, it's so easy for you to step into victimization when things like seem askew, like you're like, oh my God, and it can be crazy. So like that's very comforting. That was super comforting. King Solomon for me has been talking to me through his many books of alchemy. I started hanging out with Aleister Crowley first. Aleister Crowley took me into King Solomon. King Solomon has just been teaching me like about kingship and how a king thinks and how a leader thinks. And he was an ascension guide, so he's been teaching me a lot about ascension guidance, leading other people, which is like, the way, if you live in alchemy, everything that defines your reality has to change. Like you may be living in a co-created reality with other people who are experiencing different levels of the same subject matter, but that plays into some scope of reality, but not all scopes of reality. And it makes you like this like powerful being that like nullifies you from certain people's energy, like the collective particularly. And I think that's why like that's really harnessing your light body, being able to have so much energy and so much control over yourself, where you can still interact and feel everyone else's vibration interpret it, understand it, but not be affected by it unless you choose to actively say, I'm going to be affected by it. And that's one of the biggest issues that any empath literally deals with, is just the fact that, like, oh man, I'm feeling everybody's emotions. How do I stop this from happening? And every empath usually diverts their power into victimization. Like, I can't hang out with people because, oh my God, I can't, I feel everyone's emotions, or like, whatever, blah, blah, some excuse other than saying like, hey, I'm going to take the time to control my energy and be like, no, I'm not going to let other people's stuff get to me. I can hear it, because obviously you have to hear it if you're an empath. You can't shut it off, but you can change the perception as from it being a personal experience to just being something that you observe walking by, similar like a bird flying by, like, oh wow, that person is going through XYZ. That bird has a red back and blue feathers, and that all comes back to like what King Solomon tells us about. Is like, it's light work. It's all about your consciousness, understanding that the present moment is what actually gives you the ability to become the ultimate alchemist. Like, King Solomon was a huge alchemist, and all of his, like, he's the one that originally taught me how to do alchemy tables for my quantum Reiki. And he was like, if you design these alchemy tables, you'll pull out the full potential of this certain vibration of life. And it's just like, his alchemy tables go so deep where they're not even tied to, like, they're tied to constellations, but they're tied to events. They're tied to like certain situations, Mother Nature, things like that. And they're all states of consciousness. I have one talisman that is at one of my doors, and literally I love watching it work, because it's about keeping negative people away, like out of the house and stuff like that. So people will come through and like, they don't want to step through the front door because of that talisman, because it's like, oh, like you're coming in with negative energy and you don't want to let it go. So bye. And almost everyone turns around and leaves. It's so funny to watch. Because it's so powerful and so subconscious. But then at the same time, I've noticed that same talisman has forced me to like not attach myself to negative events. Like, if you're driving and someone cuts you off, because you can feel that, like, that's one thing that really gets to me as being a really high level empath. I'll be in a car, I'll be driving, and I can feel everybody else's stress. Like, I gotta get home right now. Or like, whatever it is. And it's so powerful that it makes me kind of mischievous, and or almost like rebellious. So then I will hear someone who's like, oh my God, I'm going to get around this Jeep. Screw this guy. And I'll accelerate, because I already know they're anticipating to do that, just to kind of like calm them down and put them in like this present moment of like, chill out. Like, driving doesn't have to be so stressful. And when like dealing with that kind of energy as an empath, like, and being able to sense that stuff, is just really, it's cool when you see it from Solomon's point of view of like, now I go out and I can feel those energies around me, but I choose not to interact. Like, okay, this person's annoyed at me because they don't think I'm driving fast enough, so they're about to like accelerate. Let them accelerate. Like, it's their reality. They want to experience that reality. I don't have to have an attachment to it. I don't have to engage. I don't have to accelerate. I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to let them continue on their own path. And that brings this serenity that by the time I get home, I walk by that talisman. And if I've even tried to walk past the talisman before I've dealt with it, by the time I get home, any sort of stress, it's very challenging for me. And I'll actually want to go on a walk instead of actually stepping into the house. So it keeps me in check too. And it's morphed my reality into being more peaceful. So if you guys don't know anything about the King Solomon books, they are powerful, but you should definitely go check them out if you are somebody that likes to dive into alchemy. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That was today's broadcast. I just want to share my experiences with it. Like, he's super bomb. And the next channeling we're going to have is, I'm not sure. Give me 2 more seconds. I'll tell you exactly what it is. we have a channeling to be announced. So there were a couple requests inside of Patreon. I have to check out who is, going to be on the next date. So I'll let you know inside of Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. Share it with your homeboys. It'll be up for a couple hours really fast. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Love you. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Stay happy, stay safe, stay radiant.